Yo, shalom, 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 everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good day. Greetings to you guys. Welcome back to another episode of Dabarym, the Scripture Research Institute. And that's what we're here to do. Do some research on some Hebrew scriptural words, break down some terms in the Bible, and get a better understanding of the language, the culture, the history, right, of the Hebrew, the people, the language and culture. You see what I'm saying? It's all go together. Very important branch of the ministry as far as again doing research on scripture, getting closer to everything we're trying to get to, the culture and understanding. So today, got a very interesting episode, you guys. We're gonna be doing our Bible name series where we look at the names of the scripture and we get to the root of the Hebrew uh, word and meaning so as to get a better understanding of the scripture. So many words um, that make up the scripture. We got to start breaking it down piece by piece. So let's get into it. I don't want to do too much talking. Like I said, today is the first of many lessons we're going to do. So many Hebrew words to get to, so many things to talk about. So we starting with the best place to start, which is the Bible names, right? Because so many names in the Bible, right? And which is that's what Dabarym all about. Again, these Hebrew words, breaking them down to the Hebrew, and you to do that, you got to do word studies. So many words in the Bible, but to get an understanding, you got to break them down one by one if we have to, and that's how you do it. That's why we're working on the Abaryth, giving you guys the ABCs. So once we finish with our understanding the ABCs, we can pretty much break down and transliterate any word in Scripture back to the Hebrew or back to the Abaryth, the true Hebrew. So we start with the most one of the most famous books in Scripture, which is Genesis. And so, first of all, we got to ask ourselves, what is Genesis? Okay, so obviously that's the name of a Bible, the name of a book in the Bible, right? That's why it's a part of our Bible name series. Genesis is the English name of the first book of the Bible, first book, right? So we got the definition here, straight out the dictionary. This is not what I think, not what you think. Everything defined itself, okay? So if you read Genesis, what's the definition of Genesis? It tells us it's the origin or mode of formation of something. So it pretty much is what it is. You know, that's not like it's a bad definition. That's not really what we trying to get after. It also goes on to tell us Genesis straight up is the first book of the Bible, the Hebrew scriptures, right? Which includes the story of the creation of the world, Noah's Ark, the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babel, and the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and of course Yahuah, commonly called Joseph. But the most important part is to the bottom. When we start talking about the language, that brings into etymology. Where does this word come from? If we talking about scripture research, we talking about Hebrew or Abaryth. But we know that our scriptures have been in many hands over the last decades and centuries, right? Last few thousands of years, it's been a lot of changes happening with the printing press, translations all around. So now it's time to really not just take back authority of our culture, but make sure we understand it thoroughly ourselves before we try to teach anybody anything, and make sure our foundation is solid. So the big part of that is, again, understanding etymology. Where is the root of these words coming from? So Genesis basically is a late Old English word, as it's telling us down here. I should have highlighted it, but I'm pretty sure I just want to direct you guys' attention to the bottom of the screen. We could read and tell us the origin. It says via Latin from Greek, right? And it basically means generation, creation, nativity, horoscope, from the base of genestai, to be born or produced. So Genesis is the infancy, the beginning, the origin of any particular thing. We get that. Point is, it's not a Hebrew word. It's it's an old English word, right? We know it's English, that's why we're speaking in the English, but it's via the Latin, which the English language uses the Latin alphabet, which is from the Greek, right? So that's not of our culture, right? So we want to see what's the Hebrew name and get the cultural context from that perspective. That's what this is all about, from as far as scripture research is concerned. So we get to tell the name was given to the first book of the Old Testament in the Greek translation. Septuagint. So the word Genesis, so we all know, it comes from the Septuagint, which was the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures, right? Hence in the Latin Vulgate, hence in the Latin translation, the Vulgate. So it was in the Septuagint, and then that's why we get it in the Vulgate, etc. And now it's in every translation. But I feel like as Hebrews, we should be able to speak some type of Hebrew, right? We should know how to say these words in our natural tongue, right? So Genesis means the beginning, right? So we got to go back to the beginning, right? So how do you say that in the Hebrew, in Abaryth? How do you say Genesis in Abaryth? So, we got to take it back to, again, before the printing press, before the Greeks and before the Romans. You know what I'm saying? We got to go back to the ancient times, Old Testament times. So to find this answer, how do you say Genesis in Hebrew? You go to the book of Genesis, right? Verse 1, chapter 1, verse 1. And each scroll, if you guys don't know, the scroll is named after the first word on the scroll. So the first word of this quote unquote Genesis scroll is by the sheet, right? So we have it pictured here, Genesis 1:1, very famous and iconic chapter. You cannot talk about Hebrew, breaking down Hebrew words, transliterating anything. We talk about word studies, you can't talk about that without looking at one of the most infamous stretches, like the most infamous batches of Hebrew text. Genesis by the sheet 1:1. This is it. So much scholars and scriptural research is done about this first initial book. It's poured over. It's come in many different scrolls, different versions. Anyway, let's take a crack at reading it. And in the pound for pound Abaryth, right? We could still read the language without the 5 points. Once you know the alphabet, you put it together like ABC is too simple. So we got by the sheet, Bada, Alahim, At, Hashamim, U'at, Ha'arat. It said what it said, man. It's translation right here from your brother Yahuah. So what does that mean? We get it. In the beginning, Elohim, right? At, Bada, he created, he formed, he cut the Shamim, the sky, and At, Ha'arat, the pieces, the portions, the pottery pieces of land, right? So it say what it say, but the whole keyword is by the sheet. And that is the H7225, right? Translated as in the beginning. But what does this really mean in the Hebrew, right? Not talking about Genesis. We're not talking about beginning. We're talking about bar sheet, in which we're going to see bar is a preposition. We're really talking about Rashid, okay? That is the main word we're focusing on today, family. Rashid. So we're going to go a little bit deeper again into our concordance. You guys need this concordance, man. I'm gonna try to, I think I said this in another video, make sure I put the link to the concordance. These days people don't open up the books and study no more. When we came into this truth, man, you have to know these Strong's numbers. You got to know the Strong's number for Yahuah, his name, any name you want to look up. You need to understand the Strong's numbers, what a concordance is, what a lexicon is. We're really trying to advocate for the study. People showing this studying to show themselves approved in his word. That's what this is all about, right? So the Strong's number 7225, Rashid, okay? And what we can see is that Rashid is it's a noun, feminine noun, right? The same from the root word Rosh, which is very important. That's the 7218. We're gonna touch on that a little bit. Anytime we see a word come from a root, we got to touch on the root. Give me 1 second before we get there. But just look at the word Rashid. We can see this used a total of 51 times throughout all of the canon. And it's translated as beginning, first fruits, the first, or the chief of anything. And it's kind of miscellaneous sometimes. Just, again, going to show us that one Hebrew word can be translated to many different forms of the English, to many different other English words. There's not one English word that can accurately define a Hebrew word. And that's transcendent in itself. And that just shows the need for breakdowns and deeper dives into it like this, because we got to basically give people an idea. You have to understand the concept, because there's not one single word that's going to accurately convey the concept of this word. But we're going to do our best, right? So the outline of biblical usage is just like what we see in the translation count. It basically is used to mean first, the beginning of something, the best of something, or chief, right? Choicest part of something in scripture. That's basically what you need to know. We're going to actually let the scripture do the defining for us. The scripture, we're going to get our definitions from scripture and let the scripture define itself as we read a few passages. But this gives us a great idea of what are we talking about when we mention this word. It doesn't mean Genesis. It means first, basically, the beginning of something. So again, Rashid, this interlinear is giving us the definition, the Strong's definition. Again, we touched on it. The first, in place or time or in rank order, right? Specifically, first fruits in a different context, right? It's not always talking about fruit, but in the Hebrew context, it is mentioned a lot as first fruits. That's important to understand, which basically gives us the connotation of beginning of something, the chiefest, choices, first fruit, principal thing. So that's all and very, very important. And we see it's telling us it's the same as the H7218. So what is the 7218? This is very important as well because this is also the name of a letter, right? You see, this is a root word. It says Rosh, right? Rosh. This is Strong's number H7218. Okay, also very important to understand and note. Like I said, this is a root word and it's also the name of a letter. This is the letter R with the Rosh, but you can check that out and learn more about that in our Abaryth series, right? Because these are paramount foundational understanding. Understand the Abaryth, understanding the names of the scriptures. How do you get these names? We're trying to make sure we leave no stone unturned as far as conveying the understanding and really just taking everything that we have and we understand things. We using these words and terms when we doing our Hebrew lessons, when we doing daily bread, we using these terms. So I really felt like it's incomplete of me. It's not really right until I explain the terms I'm using thoroughly. So it's a video for each term. So that's our goal with the ministry again, and specifically with this branch, Hebrew and Scripture Research Institute, like getting into the word. So you need to understand the Abaryth. This is also the name of the letter R, but it's the root word of what you know as Genesis about a sheep, and it means the head. Simply, we see that a lot of Hebrew Abaryth are a lot of the Hebrew language and understanding the pictographic. It has to do with the body parts. So he gives us clear physical analogies or parables or just parallels so that we understand what does head mean, the first of something. The head, the chiefest, the choices, the topmost, the beginning part of the body we see and understand it. And it's just that simple. We could pause this and take a look at every usage. But again, this is why we do this, because it is impossible to find one Hebrew word with just one English word. But to keep it short and sweet and get back to Badashit, just know the root word of Rashid is Rosh, which means head, literally. Okay. And you can see again, it's used almost 600 times in scripture. So we see how much of a root word it is and how pivotal it is to other words that are branches of the parent root, right? So that's important. So scripture, we can get an understanding of how these words, like Rashid, is used in scripture. When we look at verses like this, Mashali, chapter 1, verse 7, it reads, the fear of Yahuah is the beginning, the choicest most part thing, the foremost and the head of knowledge, right? The head, the beginning of knowledge is the fear of Yahuah. But it tells us fools will despise wisdom and instruction. So if you're a fool, this may not be for you, because that's all we're getting into is wisdom, instruction, right? And understanding, knowledge. So to know Yahuah, right? We living for Yahuah. These are things we must understand. So I'm happy to be just breaking it down. I hope again we're able to get a lot from this as far as having a clear understanding. So we see the word listed by the sheet. It's important to understand ba is a preposition. That is the beat. The beat, again, another very important word in the Abaryth. In the quote unquote ABCs of Hebrew, the beat is a preposition that means in or within or of something, right? So it's saying in the beginning, literally. But the Rashid part is actually what means beginning. The ba is actually in. So it's very important to understand that. And once you understand it, you can see Hebrew words or the Abaryth words in terms crystal clear, without 5 points. It's transliterated the same every time. You don't need a 5 point. Remember, it's important to remember our forefathers did not know that, understand that. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Shalimah, Yahuah, they did not use 5 points. It was not until the death of the Mashiach, again, when our history was up in the air and a lot of opportunists took the scrolls, you know what I'm saying, and tried to, they made rules around the language. And that's something we really just don't consent to. You know, it actually they broke the Torah by literally adding to the word. So my point is, it's very simple to see and read, transliterate the Abaryth language. When you understand the characters, you know, Abaryth, literally ABCs, and you let the scriptures define themselves. So with that said, we're gonna look at some verses in scripture that contain the word Rashid, right? So first scripture is Uyakra, commonly called Leviticus chapter 23, verse 10, and it reads, "Speak unto the children of Yasharah and say unto them, when you," oh man, this is a KJV translation. I know I hate the KJV, but bear with me. "When you be come into the land which I give unto you, and will reap the harvest thereof, then you will bring a sheaf of the first fruits," or the beginning, the first of your harvest, the choicest most thing, right? By the sheep, Rashid, right? Literally Rashid. You will bring a sheaf of the first, right, of your harvest into the priest. So we see again this H7225 being used here. Same word that we know as Genesis, Rashid, the first sheaf. We have to bring it to the priest. That's what Yahuah commanded the children of Yasharah. Continuing on, Ecclesiasticus, also known as Kahalat. What's that word? What's that book in Hebrew? Kahalat, right? The preacher, the teacher, the one and only Shalimah. Book he wrote, chapter 7, verse 8. It reads, "Better is the end of a thing than what? Than the Rashid, than the beginning of it," right? That's the H7225 again. Than the beginning thereof. "And the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit." So again, we have the parable, got an analogy. He comparing two things, giving it to you two different ways so we get understanding. But the reason we're looking at this is because, again, this word Rashid is being used here again. What we know as Genesis is Rashid, the beginning of a thing. Basically, as scripture defines itself. Continuing on, our next example. We turn into the book of Isaiah, also known as Yashayahu, chapter 46, verse 10, right? And it reads, he's talking about Yahuah and his esteem. He declares the end from Rashid. I love this scripture. He declares Yahuah is so great, and I love how he talk about his prophets, right? His servants allude to his greatness and his presence. Yahuah is all knowing. Who else can do this? Declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, "My counsel will stand and I will do all my pleasure." This is a great statement to read. But anyway, that's why we're living for Yahuah. But it's important for us to understand Yahuah. But to understand Yahuah, we got to understand these Abaryth terms and these words. So again, here we see the H7225 being used to mean the beginning, the choicest part, the first of a thing. But Yahuah declares the first from the end. He declared the end from the beginning. And that's what's so great about him. But driving home the point of, you see Rashid being used as first fruits, beginning, etc., etc. First, look into the book Yakazakar, right, commonly called Ezekiel, chapter 44, verse 30. And it reads, "In the first," okay, this is where right here again, H7225, "the first of all the first fruits of all things." And it's important to understand this word first fruits is not the same as this word being for first. The word for first fruits here is Bakarim or Bakari. So that is the actual word for the term for the feast day, Bakar, right? First fruits. That is literally like the name of the offering. Because that it's another root to like firstborn child, firstborn animal. Like it's another term, Bakar. Literally talking about a firstborn thing. But you see, just pointing out a different nuance, because this word, he's saying the first in principle, ordinance, or in counting, that first, just first period, on the beginning period, that is the H7225. This word for first fruits is a different Hebrew term. So that's why, again, you let scripture define itself, because it, just like it doing the parable, it give you the thing, the example, the metaphor, and the parallel. So you get all the context you need to clearly understand that word. And that's what we're getting right here. And it's great. So he's saying, in the first of all, of the first fruits of all things, and every oblation of every sort of your oblations will be the priest. And it's very clear. It's a command, right? You will also give unto the priest the first, right, in ordinance, the first in count of your dough, that he may cause the barakah, or the blessing, to rest upon your house. So, again, just first. Rashid means the first. Again, the choice is the head of a thing, principle in thing. Like, we got it from the definition already, but the scripture give you all the context to squeeze the juice out of the lemon, or out of the orange, right? And it's very clear. Rashid is first. The first word we're gonna cover. If we're gonna do breakdown of each biblical book in the Hebrew, this one got to be the first. It's literally first. Rashid, first in order, principle, choice, all that. In ordinance. It's very important to understand. So continuing on, we got Husha, right? Name of this prophet, commonly called Hosea, chapter 9, verse 10. Another instance, right? It reads, I found Yasharal like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your fathers as the first ripe in the fig tree at her first time. First time, the beginning of the season, beginning of the blossom. And again, obviously, right there, the first use is same word, Rashid, the Strong's H7225. Continuing on, it reads, but they went to Baal Peor. No! They went to Baal Peor and separated themselves unto that shame. And their abominations were according as they loved. Okay, so we don't need to belabor that point, man, a little bit. You know, what did we learn? How can we sum it up? Again, these lessons not made to be super long, super comprehensive. There's a whole bunch more scriptures we could have went to. You can show Rashid in a lot of different instances, but what's important to understand is the Strong's number, giving you guys that strong number, giving you guys the introduction to it and the overall view of it. You can study this for Shabbat after Shabbat. You know, so many lessons in there. This is only the beginning of your studies, but we wanted to make sure, just drive the point home, give you guys a simple and clear definition and answer. What is the Hebrew word for Genesis, right? So what did we learn? By the sheet, commonly called Genesis, is the first book of Hebrew scrolls, also known as Abaryth scriptures, right? Also known as the Bible. And you know, a lot of times we use all these synonymous words, and it's important for us. It's important for us to use synonymous words, because we don't want to just keep saying Hebrew. Who gave us that word Hebrew? What is that? You know, people use it like brewing coffee or something, but that's not really the full understanding of the word. Understanding our people and our culture, you got to call them by what they call. They call Abaryth, Dabarym. The people, as the people are Abaryth. The language is the Abaryth. What is Abar? To switch sides, to cross over. We're gonna cover this word as well, but we need to understand that fully as a people, the meaning of these things, right? The language is called Abaryth. And after the 10 tribes were dispersed, it was called the Yahudim, only for the Yahudim, because it was the Yahudim, quote unquote Jews, right? They was living in the Yasharal, but that land of the Yahudim was called Yehuda, right? They were the Yahudim, and they spoke Yahudi, right? The language of the Yahudim was Yahudi. And these are very important terms. We can't just say Jews and they spoke Jewish and they were living in Judea. Like is for me, it's technically incorrect. So we want to be correct as possible. I do, especially addressing the scriptures, the word, history that spans this long. You have to be technically correct, because what we find is this is oftentimes the source of so many debates in scripture, because people are not accurately sourcing the terms. The biggest debate, again, the name of Yahuah. And you know what we stand at. We living for Yahuah. But there's millions of people out there who are going to tell me that don't matter. And that is crazy work. That's crazy work. That's crazy. Anyway, the Abaryth, or the Hebrew term or the word, is Strong's number 7225, Rashid. And you see what we give you guys, the Dabarym pound for pound breakdown. If you look this word up, you're going to see the Rosh, you're going to see the Shun, you're going to see the Yod, and you're going to see the two. And we study this. We tell you guys in the Abaryth breakdown, two is a T at the end, T at the beginning of a word, but it's a TH at the end of a word. Just like Ruth and Beth, just how they get Bethlehem, it's a TH in the middle places of the word. So the rules show, and they show themselves, and they are exemplified in every transliteration, and you don't need to explain it. It's common sense. And this is the Abaryth. It's so simple. So what did we learn? Barashit means in the beginning, with the ba at the Rashid, at the purpose as a preposition for the Rashid. Barashit means in the beginning in the Abaryth language. Literally interpreted, it can also mean first fruit, first head, really, Barashit, right? But literally just first in anything, chief or principal thing, right? So first in ordinance is the meaning of Rashid, right? So that's what we got for you. Dabarym Scripture Research Institute. It's a type of breakdown studies you can expect to come from us. We won't stop until we have given you guys the Abaryth term for every word in the scripture, right? We try to get to Yahuah name. That's the biggest lesson. That's the most important thing. I'm gonna spend like a whole month on that. Make sure we just share that and just blast that all over the internet. Yahuah names matter. Yahuah names matter. Yasharal names matter. But we're gonna finish with Abaryth, the Aleph Beat series. Give you guys the ABCs first, so you can understand the transliteration process. We start and to give you guys the Hebrew names of the books, all the names of the prophets matter, and we just slowly giving you guys scriptural content. Scripture Research Institute, Dabarym, because the words matter, and the words are the building blocks of scripture, family. And we want you guys to have all the tools you need to be able to break down scripture, understand these terms, and flourish, and to ultimately grow closer to Yahuah. And that's what this is about, no doubt. So it's been your brother, Yahuah, reporting live from Dabarym. I will see you guys in the next episode, right? Yahuah willing. Shalom.